more time to do this. Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame induction weekend is this weekend. And this is a really good class. It's not, from a star power standpoint, it's not like, oh, wow, Jerry Rice is being inducted this weekend. But when you want to just talk about, like, solid, really good people who've accomplished a ton in sports in the state of Mississippi, there is not a there's not a dud in this class. So, Kermit Davis Sr., legendary basketball coach at Mississippi State, being inducted in the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame. Eric Moulds, I would argue the best receiver in Mississippi State football history. Am I crazy for that argument?
No.
Okay. Do you agree?
At this time, yes, but I get the feeling in a couple of years I'll be saying no.
Okay, so maybe it changes over the course of time. David Delucci, a Baton Rouge native who came to play college baseball in Mississippi and was an All-American and a 14-year big leaguer.
With a ring.
With a World Series title with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Jim Gallagher Jr., friend of Sports Talk Mississippi. I talked with Jim yesterday. It was yesterday or 2 days ago. It was yesterday. I just wanted to congratulate him, and, man, he was so excited. And I asked him if there's now going to be a Gallagher wing at the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame. His wife, Sissy, is in the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame as well. He said he didn't know about that. But really cool to see Jim inducted. It's meant so much to amateur golf in the state of Mississippi. Bob Tyler. What a coaching career, but what an impact on the state of Mississippi as well. Assistant coach under Johnny Vaughan at Ole Miss. Was going to be and should have been the head coach, and it's one of the most bungled historical times in the history of the Ole Miss athletics department. I mean, just blew up what was a slam dunk transition. Went on to be the head football coach at Mississippi State, had some success there. Became the athletics director at Mississippi State. And then later in his career was the head football coach at Millsaps, was the executive director of the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Just one of the greatest human beings you will ever meet. To this day, I think my favorite interview ever on this radio program was with Bob Tyler. We did a show years and years and years ago when we were doing some high school football Friday road shows, and we were in Water Valley. And the game ended up being postponed because the weather was so bad, torrential downpour. And so here we are doing a radio show just kind of talking about stuff. And Bob Tyler, who lived in Water Valley and maybe still does, came by and sat down for at least half an hour and just told stories. And one of the kindest people you will ever meet. What were you going to say, hey, Dad, about Bob Tyler?
I saw a message board post yesterday talking about Bob Tyler, and they said if he hadn't come to Mississippi State when he did, and State's lucky that Ole Miss botched that search, like you said, Mississippi State might not be in the SEC today. That's how bad that football program was at that time, that they might not have made it through if Bob Tyler hadn't come in and sort of changed things and got things going for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting – I had never heard that, but the person who said it, I'll believe them.
Well, and the deal with him at Ole Miss was he was the hand-picked successor heir.
That's incredible.
That's who Johnny Vaughan groomed to carry on what he had been doing. But then you got a little bit of an internal power play, Kennard family, AD hires brother. It all blows up spectacularly. And you've already messed things up with Bob Tyler and the continuity process that was there from John Vaughan to Bob Tyler. So I don't think it's as drastic as thinking that Ole Miss was going to be leaving the SEC if it had not worked out at that time. But it led to some lean years for Ole Miss football post John Vaughan. Barry Lyons, one of the great storytellers, big leaguer with the Mets organization, huge for professional baseball, independent baseball, minor league baseball in the state of Mississippi. I'm gonna stop right there because I don't want to just rip two more names off and get the induction class for the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame before the break. Discussing Barry Lyons and some of his contributions to baseball, world champion with the New York Mets. Played with the Mets and the Dodgers and the Angels and the White Sox, and has been involved in minor league and independent league baseball for just years and years and years in the state of Mississippi. 62 years old from Biloxi, Barry Lyons will be inducted this weekend into the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame. And then two more names. Maybe you recognize these names, maybe you don't. First of all, if you have followed high school football in the state of Mississippi, you know who Willis Wright is. Retired Justice George Carlson sent me a story that Rick Cleveland wrote about this as well. It says, perhaps it will someday be the epitaph on Willis Wright's headstone. Here lies the man who created the University of South Panola. Earlier this week, Willis Wright said, I got no business going into that Hall of Fame with those legends. I'll just be honest with you. I feel unworthy of this honor. I appreciate it, but I feel unworthy. He was a head high school football coach at 8 different schools and won 80% of his games. How good is that? He's the guy that got it all going at South Panola. How about this? This from Rick Cleveland's story. In high school football, the head coach gets all the headlines. Willis Wright didn't care. In fact, Wright returned to South Panola at the end of his career and served 2 different head coaches as defensive coordinators. Those South Panola teams, head coached by Ricky Woods and Lance Pogue, won 75 games and lost 1. Ooh. They went 75-1. And they didn't give up many points along the way. It's pretty humble to hear Willis Wright, or a guy filled with humility, maybe I should say it that way, to hear someone who has accomplished what he has accomplished in the state of Mississippi say, I don't deserve to be in the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame with those legends like Kermit Davis Sr., Eric Moulds, David Delucci, Jim Gallagher, Bob Tyler, etc. But if there's anybody in high school football in the state of Mississippi that deserves to go in the Sports Hall of Fame here in our state, Willis Wright's it. Yeah. You guys remember what those teams looked like. And it started in the early 90s, and it rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled.
Yeah, 92 was the first one with Dwayne Rudd and Deshae Townsend and those guys. I know they won in 93 because they beat Warren Central. So I remember that, being in the paper in Vicksburg.
And then Maggie Bowen Hanna is also being inducted into the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame as part of this class. Maybe you don't know exactly who Maggie Bowen Hanna is. World champion swimmer. 3-time SEC Swimmer of the Year. In 2001, swimming at the World Championships in Japan, she won the gold medal in the 200-meter individual medley and silver in the 400 medley. She was the best in the world. At Auburn, where she swam with her older sister Mimi, she won an NCAA championship and was a 21-time All-American and the SEC Women's Swimmer of the Year, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and was the Mississippi Sports Person of the Year in 2001. Never quite made the U.S. Olympic team. 3 different times she came close. Missing it by as little as 15 100ths of a second. And that was when she was a freshman at Auburn. So that's your class that's going in. So you've heard the names. Tell me who stands out or what stands out. What do you remember about these people? What have you read about these people that makes you pretty fired up that they're going into the Hall of Fame?
Not so much about what I remember, because I learned about this person earlier today, but having 21-time All-American next to your name is a pretty unique thing.
Yeah.
Only in college for 4 years. So, yeah.
Sports are a game of inches. That's why we love them so much, because the margin for error is so thin. But swimming is a unique animal. I mean, you mentioned that margin. A friend of mine's sister was a borderline Olympic swimmer. Missed making the Olympic team on the touchpad. The still image by this much on the screen. This much. That's it. Difference between going to the Olympics and not at all. Swimming is a brutal animal when it comes to how close you are, the margin from being great to being left at home, essentially. It's as close as any sport you can imagine.
Yeah, for me, obviously, Eric Moulds is the guy who stands out. And if I had to pick one play, and there's a lot of them, but against Alabama in a game that State lost, I can still see it. I was at that game as a freshman in college, where he has a leaping catch in the end zone, and that somebody got a great picture of it, and you can find it if you look for it on Google, where Moulds' hips are at the head of the Alabama cornerback. He's at least 5 feet in the air off the ground catching that football. I mean, I think he's standing next to, it might be Deshae Townsend, who's, 6 feet tall? So, I mean, yeah. Just an incredible athlete. I always heard the rumor while he was at State, and this is when, Darrell Wilson and Dante Jones were there, that he was the best basketball player on campus, that he would go play with those guys and just torch them.
Yeah. C-Spire text line. Just got in my car. Who did you say was going in from South Panola? Coach Willis Wright. Somebody says nothing against Coach Willis, but Pete Robertson and Robert Lightsey laid the groundwork for South Panola as the junior high coaches. They polished the talent that the high school obtained. Yeah, the junior high program was incredible there for many, many years. But it was kind of a total effort. Everybody was pulling in the same direction in Batesville for, 2.5 decades to build the run that they had. So he says, I believe Maggie Bowen Hannah's father is Ole Miss running back Bo Bowen, who played with Archie Manning.
That is true.
Okay. A couple of you have pointed that out.
Yeah, no swimming programs here.
Still aren't.
No. My best friend played for Coach Wright at Starkville High School. We went by Coach's house on Christmas Day to say hello. He was watching game film. Nice guy.
Kyler Murray would never.